All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Open Space Task Force meeting. First, just to say, this meeting is being recorded by the Space Task Force Committee. And if any other persons are doing the same, please let me know. All right, so let's do just a quick roll call as we call this meeting to order. And then I think after that, we'll just do a little more of an introduction after you do just a quick roll call. Mary has volunteered to take notes for us, so thanks, Mary, for doing that. I am Jonah Keene, and I am serving as the chair at the appointment of Mary from the larger Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee team. Mary, you want to go?
Yep, Mary Chickman, Chair of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee.
Francoise?
And I'm Francoise Hatt, and I'm also from the Greenfield Sustainable Implementation Committee.
Great. Emily?
Emily Boss, and I'm a member of the Conservation Commission.
Great. So at the moment, those are the members, the official members of our task force. We have a fifth spot that we had held for the Recreation Commission, who is not able to fill that spot at the moment. And we'll talk more about the positions here in a little bit. So welcome. This is exciting. Nice to see everybody. Thanks for being here. We've been talking about this for a little while, so this is great. So the first thing on our agenda is just to talk a bit about roles and membership of this group and getting it started. I thought it'd be nice just for the four of us to do maybe slightly longer introductions of just where we're coming from and our interest in being here. Nothing doesn't need to be too lengthy, but just so we get to know each other a little bit more. And I can kick us off. So I have been on the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee for a couple of years and have been a Greenfield resident for 10, 15 years maybe. And I work for Mass Audubon out of the Arcadia Wildlife Sanctuary in East Hampton. My role is currently sort of a special projects role where I do a lot of odd things, but I have been the director for the region previously, and I have worked a lot on land protection projects and restoration projects. So I am by far, I am not an expert in this work that we're doing, but I have worked on this type of work a lot. And I am passionate about it and excited to be here to help move along Greenfield in our open space work. We'll go in a different order this time. Emily, you want to go?
Sure. Hi. Let's see. So I've just joined the Greenfield Conservation Commission recently, but I've lived in Greenfield for a little over a decade. I work in conservation. I work for Franklin Land Trust based out of Shelburne. And I previously was the land protection specialist, so I did that work for about a decade. And I am the director of a subsidiary of the land trust that it's called Mass Woodlands Institute, that helps support stewards of the land across the region. And we've worked on a variety of projects that are climate focused. And so I'm really interested in working on this to help figure out ways to take the plans, the variety of plans that the municipality has, and put them into motion. From my work, it's just clear that the impacts of climate change, like this week, are around us, and our infrastructure just isn't suited to it. So I'm really excited for this opportunity to take part in the planning process, and then also to help liaise with the Conservation Commission.
Great. Yes. Thanks, Emily. Francoise?
Yes, so I just joined the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee. I'm also recently retired from UMass, where I was working at the Water Resources Research Center. And so water is more like my specialty. I'm interested in all natural resources and recreation as well. I do use Highland Park, Temple Woods a lot. And so I'm really interested in the natural resources piece of open space, and hope that I can help in any way I can on this committee.
Great. Thanks for being here. Mary.
Yep, so I've been on Sustainable Greenfield for, I don't know, a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, hard to say. Before I retired, I was a land use and natural resources planner for the Franklin Regional Council of Government. And my primary sort of goal or interest in this particular task force is moving forward a lot of the recommendations from the open space and rec plan. We have a great advocate for all things recreation in our recreation department director. But I think there are ways in which we can serve to really highlight and bring to the mayor or whoever else in the city projects that we think are important, opportunities, just to get ourselves better sort of strategically positioned to respond rather than react to various things happening with open space in the city.
Yeah, excellent. Great. All right, we'll talk some more about that. Great. So for roles, I have offered to start leading this group. As I mentioned, I'm not necessarily an expert in this work. And I also have a young family and not the most time on my hands, but this is important work and I want to make it happen. I'm in no way tied to this role. So as we're moving along and if it turns out someone has more time or availability, we want to talk about switching that around, I'm happy to talk about that, but also happy to get us started here. And Mary has offered to be our note taker for these first couple of meetings, but that's something else that we'll talk about as we go along. If somebody else is up for taking that on, would be great. I don't know. I would just put it out there. If there are other roles that we want to have on this team, I see us hopefully as being an active committee, and we're not just here once a month having conversations, but that we are having some projects that we're able to move forward outside of these meetings. So we may have specific roles that develop over time. I know there's some of the different directions that we might go. There's some people that are specifically interested in managing our existing open space and improving some of the work on those. So I could see a role of somebody taking a leadership role with that aspect of what we might do. So I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on specific roles we'd want to create at this time.
I think because Sustainable Greenfield already has the official structure, I don't think we're required to have any additional officers or anything like that. So I'm fine with just sort of waiting and seeing what is needed as we go along. And I would be all for, each of us taking leads on various things depending upon the topic and, our area of interest or expertise.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. So the last thing under this topic was thinking of the membership. So when Mary and I first started talking about this, we had said, let's think of it maybe as a small team of 5 or so, and hoping to have representation from the Conservation Commission and Recreation Commission. And unfortunately, Recreation Commission at this time doesn't have anybody who has capacity to do this. So just wanted to put out there what our thoughts are with, generally an even number is not as ideal. It's sort of, the goal is usually to have an odd number, and then quorum would be, more than half with 4 of us. If quorum would just be 2 people, it'd be a little strange. So we could think about adding somebody else in a 5th role, or even more than that if folks felt like we had a need or interest in that. So just put it out there.
I thought at the meeting where we were talking about creating this, that it was said that members of the public would be able to join. So how would that work? Do they just tell us, or do we pick them ourselves?
Yeah, well, so there's two options. One is just anybody can show up, and you can show up to every meeting, from the public and have an active role that way. That's totally acceptable way for people to be involved, and they can be just as involved as an official member in that way. We can decide if we want to make them a voting member. That would be up to us. It wouldn't be just anybody can join kind of thing, but we could decide if we wanted to have sort of official voting members. The type of work I imagine us doing, I don't imagine it being a lot of voting that we're doing. It's going to be, in my mind, more projects that we're working on advancing. But I don't have a set way in my mind of how it should be. So if we wanted to add more, if there's interest from the public in people becoming more official members, I think it's definitely worth us talking about and adding folks if there's interest. Other thoughts on that?
I'm wondering if we think we want to have more than just the 4 members that we've started with. Should we, put out some sort of an announcement or something like that we're, opening our, predetermine how many we think we want, and then provide the public with an opportunity to respond. I'm thrilled that Pat is here, but I also think it would only be fair to, make it a public process.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, then we know who's actually interested,
Mm-hmm.
to join the committee and attend regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, and four seems a little small. So I think if we could get to 5 or 7, I don't think we'd want to go too big, but I think that could be a good numbers for us. So does that sound like a plan? Then I can put something together and put out a public call for interest to be submitted.
Sure.
And do we know if we're looking for a particular kind of person? Given the makeup of who we have at the table here, the 4 of us, are there particular areas of expertise that we are seeking? And if so, we should think about that and make that part of the announcement instead of just like, oh, come join the committee,
Right. Yeah, it's a good thought. Maybe we should circle back to that as we talk a little bit more about what we want to focus on here initially, because there's a lot that could be focused on, and we're gonna have to make some choices about where to focus. So, yeah. So should we circle back to that?
Sure.
Great. All right. So we'll move on to talking about the goals of this group. I always get mixed up calling it different things. Task force sounds it sounds a little funny to me. The reason we chose task force is that's the language in the SGIC rules, is that in SGIC they can create a task force, and so that's what we created. We see it basically as a subcommittee, though with representation, including folks that are not on SGIC. So it's basically serves in the same way a freestanding open space committee would serve. There's really no other difference in the way that we're doing it, but we are calling it a task force, and sometimes I call it a task force committee, which is confusing. So I have to keep it straight. But it's the reason that we created it is that it has been in our plans. Of course, we have had, as Emily alluded to, I think, and we've talked about in SGIC quite a bit. It's been in Greenfield's master plan since 2014, but maybe even before that. And it's in our open space and recreation plan to create an open space committee. So that's why we said it was time to make it happen. Over the last many years, there's been some concern from previous mayors about creating a freestanding committee just because of the challenge of filling vacancies on committees. So that's why it has not actually happened previously, is the reason I'm told. And that's how this particular way of creating it as a task force, the current mayor is on board with, and it seemed like an easier lift than getting a freestanding committee off the ground. So here we are. And I, thinking about the goals of this group, Mary mentioned the existing open space and recreation plan from 2021, which she was involved with creating. That's a good plan. There's a lot of work that went into that. There's the whole public process that went into that. And it makes sense from my perspective for us to be using that to some degree as our guiding document. It gives legitimacy to the work that we're doing. It's not just us thinking, hey, what should we do next? But this is work that a lot of people put thought into and the public had input on. So using that document, I think, makes a lot of sense. Emily, you mentioned there's also other plans that have open space related goals in them as well, including the master plan, the municipal vulnerability preparedness plan, others as well, I'm sure. So I think, looking at the various plans that we have in place, it all makes sense, and taking goals from any of those that apply to this would seem appropriate to me, with the OSRP being kind of the primary one that we would lean on. Then thinking of that, the scope of just the OSRP is quite large. So there's a lot of refining work for us to do. As Mary referred to, when you think about the OSRP, we have a very active recreation department and a recreation commission that have really been, if you go through the OSRP and look at the goals in there, they're checking off boxes left and right on the recreation goals. Things like the skate park and bocce courts and various things that they're checking off, which is great. One of my excitements for this group is that there hasn't been as much capacity to focus on the conservation side. The Conservation Commission is the one group, along with the conservation agent, who's part-time, who have the task of looking at this work. But the Conservation Commission, of course, is also dealing with wetland permitting, which just takes a tremendous amount of time. So I know there's some progress that's happening with the Conservation Commission in doing some additional work beyond wetland permitting. And Emily can be our liaison to look at that and make sure that we're working together with the Conservation Commission. To me, the big thing is wanting to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts or stepping on toes. Like there's so much to do. We have these big plans with great goals and there's so much to do. I want to make sure that we're here to augment the existing efforts and to grow the work that we're doing. That's sort of priority in my mind. Not wanting to step on anyone's toes, for sure. So as we think about the goals within that context, I have some thoughts about spending some time looking at the goals that are written out. But any other big picture thoughts on the goals of this committee that anybody else wanted to share or to question?
Oh, I have the same idea as, looking at the plan and all of the recommendations. It's really overwhelming, right? And so I was wondering, how are we going to deal with this? Are we going to take sections and deal with sections one at a time, or look at the whole thing and just pick and choose go for the low-hanging fruit first? Or
Right. Yeah.
I think you covered the goals pretty well, Jonah.
Yeah.
For now, anyway.
And Mary and I definitely know from the last couple of years on SGIC, a big spreadsheet of goals can be daunting, and the process of reviewing it as a team can be daunting. So I think we want to spend a little time thinking about how we want to prioritize and be as efficient with that process as possible. A couple other specific thoughts of mine are thinking about the gaps of where we haven't had the capacity to do work. One of those is in protecting new conservation land and taking advantage of some funding sources that are out there. We have not, as a community, applied for the land acquisition grant through the state that is available to municipalities, that is available to us to apply for, and we haven't been taking advantage of it just due to lack of capacity, I think, to look at that. And paired with the CPC, which we now have, can put us in a situation to be moving forward with land protection projects with full funding and not having to worry about scraping up funds from other places. So I see, in my mind, a priority for us thinking about opportunities like that have not been able to been taken advantage of, that we could help move along. And what
Maybe this is a little premature, but I'm just wondering how like, if we're looking at land protection projects and we're looking to apply for funding, are we looking to apply for funding, or we're making that recommendation to some other city entity?
Yeah,
Typically, it's the Conservation Commission that would be the entity that would hold, or although, of course, the recreation can as well. So we'd probably be facilitating that for another entity that would have the legal standing.
yeah, and we would need for that particular grant program, right, Emily, for the land acquisition, I would believe a CR is required if we're.
Typically, it is. I
Yeah.
don't know for that. I haven't dealt with that particular grant, but that's very common.
Yeah.
And for CPA funds, that's also required.
Requirement. Yeah. So we would have to, so we'd be partnering with with the land trust as well to hold a conservation restriction. So there's definitely multiples. It wouldn't be us acting alone for sure. We'd be partnering with various folks to move things along. Yeah. So, I just thought I'd read this from the open space and recreation plan, just to give us a sense of the role of this committee. This is what the OSRP says, is that it will work with the mayor's office. I'm sorry, the whole goal is to create this committee to work with the mayor's office, include members of the public, and hold regular meetings and collaborate with local and regional groups such as the Deerfield River Watershed Council, Connecticut River Conservancy, Franklin Regional Council of Governments, open space committees from other towns, MassDOT, and Mass DCR. So that's the language that's in the OSRP about what this committee would be doing. So thinking of us as liaisons with other entities, I think is a big part of the vision of what this group would do as well. When I've talked with some other folks in the town, it seems our relationships with some of the other players are not super strong at this time, and with other conservation groups. And we have Emily here from one of our conservation groups, and I'm from another. So we have relationships right here. But as far as actively working on projects in Greenfield, I think there's more relationship building to be done with partner organizations, which I think we can be working on. So let's see. I think so. These two bullets of looking at the OSRP, it's kind of connected with this as well. Looking at the goals, I thought it'd be helpful just for us to spend a little time doing a quick overview together of the OSRP, and sort of getting on the same page of what we're even talking about with these goals. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see. So I just have didn't put together a pretty presentation here, but it's So this is directly from the OSRP. And just a few things that I pulled out of it that I thought were interesting in addition to the goals that are a little further down below. So according to the survey that was done as a part of this process and from the committee, there's this key vision for open space, which seems relevant for us to think about how we fit in. So increasing the city's resilience to climate change through thoughtful conservation and stewardship of open spaces, improve physical access to and quality of our current open spaces and recreation, expanding opportunities for all residents to engage in programmed and passive recreation activities, and enhance urban spaces by increasing the city's tree canopy, pollinator gardens, community gardens, and small parks. So that was sort of the overarching vision, which sounds great. We're in a big task, lots to do there, but those are good things. And then I just cut this out as well as from the report. Thought that was just interesting to see from the survey, the interest in these as very important activities to pursue, permanently protecting land within the mapped river corridor of the Green River, protecting working farms, and protecting forests from development. So there was, quite a lot of interest expressed in that survey in the permanent protection of these key parts of Greenfield's landscape. And then one other line from the OSRP, this idea of us playing a role as this liaison and coordination between departments, which is, the SGIC is seen as having that role larger for the master plan and trying to help. There's representation from different departments on SGIC. We don't have that here on this task force, but hopefully through our connections with the larger SGIC, we can bring in folks from different parts of our city departments to be involved with this work and to help with coordination. All right, and then the specific goals and objectives that are laid out in the OSRP. There's 4 overarching goals to preserve. We won't go through every objective here now, but just to look at them, the big ones: preserve, protect, and enhance Greenfield's open spaces. And this includes both looking at our recreation facilities as well as our conservation areas. They're both components of that. And then increase municipal and public awareness, understanding, and enjoyment of Greenfield's open space and recreation facilities and programs. So this is thinking about access and connecting people to open space. Prioritize climate resiliency and open space and recreational strategies to support the health of the city's people, natural resources, and infrastructure. So climate resiliency, I think we each mentioned that a bit. That's an important part of this for all of us. And then develop, improve, and promote open space connections. So thinking about corridors is a big part of that, and connecting with other green spaces. So those are the four big categories of goals, and then there's the sub objectives, I guess they're called in here, that I didn't read. And then of course under each of them there's all the actual specific activities, of which we're talking maybe 100 actual specific things that are in the open space plan. When I look through them, to me, the vast majority of are things that we are not going to prioritize initially. There's a lot in there. There's a lot that falls under the recreation department that they're actively working on. So I see it, the next step for us is to look at that and to decide, let's hone in on what we actually want to do. And I guess I want to open that up to how we want to do that. I can just share, I'll share this one more time just to so everyone can have a visual of this spreadsheet. So we do have this spreadsheet that, it has each of those goals I just read, and then it has each objective under it, and then there's an action with each of those objectives. So, it goes on and on with many great things. This is just my own highlighting a couple of these actions that to me seemed like places where I personally had interest in us starting to focus, which is, I think, some of what Emily alluded to, and doing some planning work of looking at maps, identifying some key areas that would be priority areas for us to protect. There's different language, a few different actions that are somewhat similar in their goals around that. So I went through and just started to look at it a little bit and say, oh, here's a few key areas that personally would make sense for us to focus on. And they're all really around looking at prioritizing land for protection. And I do think it makes sense for us to have a personal element. It is a small group that we have to focus on the parts that we are excited to be spending time on. So I think it makes sense for us to do that, but the process I'd want to just discuss and see what folks think about how we want to hone in on our focus areas.
Well, can we each look at that same document and, you can make a notes column or however you want to do it so that we can each in between the meeting have a chance to look at it and do a similar sort of prioritization that you did, and then we could come back together and review and discuss from there, because we all know how painful it is to try to do it as a group process.
Yeah.
And I'm just not willing to do that on top of what we're trying to do in our bigger group. So
yeah, here. Is that okay? Is everybody okay with that type of homework of having a little just to review it?
Is it,
Yes.
I see that you could highlight things. When I read it, it was a PDF. Is it also a Google Doc?
I will share, so I'll share this with you, and I'll do I'll create a little system with some columns for us to each indicate our preferences.
Right.
But I got this from FERCog, an editable version of it, so that we can, because I think it'll be helpful for us to edit and just color code. I like to color code things. Great. So as a next step from that, I will send out a link to this and just a little introduction to how I've set it up for us to add our own input. And if we can try to do that before that next meeting, would be great. Good. Anything else that folks want to say about the goals or the process of us honing in on our goals?
This is just minor, but I wanted to seek clarification. Is it the 2020 or 2021 open space and recreation plan, since we're going to be constantly referring to it? I have it written down as both. So
I believe the plan is 2021, but that was referencing the survey work.
Oh, okay.
I think the work was done in 2020.
But it was approved in 2021, I think.
Or maybe it's just the time frame that it covers is 2021 to 2028. So maybe it is actually, I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I have a clarifying question. The task force, is it meant to be open-ended and perpetual, or was it given a certain period of time to accomplish things?
That's a good question. It does, with the name, it sounds like it should be concrete time with the task force, but we did not set a time frame for it. But we have a lot of flexibility with the way it is set up. So if we determined at some point that it doesn't make sense to run it this way, or we all lose steam or whatever it is, or if in the other direction, if there's energy to create a freestanding committee that the mayor decides that we want to go that direction, those are all possibilities. But this is currently open-ended.
Great, thank you.
But if we think there would be value to Sustainable Greenfield imposing some sort of a time limit on it, you know, if that would help focus us or anything like that, we could go back to the full group and propose that, or I guess maybe I could just do that. I'm not really sure how that works.
Yeah.
It might be good for us to have targets, you know, maybe a certain handful of a number of projects we want to have accomplished in 5 years so that we can have benchmarks.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, maybe as a part of our mapping out the goals that we can put in some benchmarks along the way. Yeah.
In
That's
the
great.
plan, they have times, you know, they have like, and it goes to 2028.
Right.
So, and I can't remember if some said, well, this will start in 2028, or I think it did. This will start in 2027. So,
Yeah, the majority of them for the date just has the time frame of the plan. So 2021 to 2028, a lot of them have as the date. Like we want to do this sometime in this time period, but some of them have more specific dates with them. Yeah, that we could work with. Great. Anything else folks wanted to add or ask about the goals?
I guess just one other observation, the focus is the open space plan, but then there are these other plans and you're dealing with the master plan as well in the larger committee. So maybe those can be supplementary. Like if we're trying to decide between some high priorities, we can always look to the other plans to see if there was emphasis on one thing over another. That's just a thought, but just seems like it'd be useful since there are so many other plans to have them at least inform each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, how we want to do that, and maybe I'll include that in what I send out as a part of the process. That if anybody has time, you know, Mary and I have spent a fair bit of time with these couple of recently redone chapters for Sustainable Greenfield. You know, maybe there's a couple key things in there that we want to make sure are included. So yeah, that's a good thought. If we have time in between as well to review some of the other plans, or if not, you know, after the next meeting, we can work that in.
I'm picturing sort of, because I'm more of a visual person, I'm picturing, you know, taking the initial homework assignment of, you know, creating our goals around the open space plan, but then also pulling in information, you know, maybe there's columns that say, oh, this is also in the master plan, or this is also in the MVP plan, or whatever, just to help us organize our thoughts. And the other piece, in case Emily and Pat and anybody else who's listening in who doesn't know, so the Conway School worked with Sustainable Greenfield this past year to do an update of the natural resources and the cultural historic, sorry, I'm getting this wrong now, the land use chapter and the natural, cultural, and historic chapter of the master plan. And so that's a little bit complicating in that we're now taking the recommendations that the Conway School provided us, and we're working our way through them in Sustainable Greenfield to make sure that they all make sense to us and to add where necessary before that document goes to the planning board. And the planning board is the entity that endorses the plan. So those recommendations are in the process of kind of being, you know, cooked. So we can bring them in as we can, but it'll be a little bit in flux for a while.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Mary. That's good. Great. All right. So as far as our goals, we will be honing in on them here, and I'll send an email with some more of that process. So the next thing for us is just thinking of how we want to structure our initial meetings beyond this first organizing meeting. So we have we have a meeting coming up in July, and then our regular recurring times starting in September. And just wanted to just get opinions on, how we want to focus that time. I know, with SGIC, we often will have, for a while, we were having an outside person come in for 20 minutes for a lot of meetings. That was a sort of a standard part of the meeting structure. So I don't know if there's stuff like that we want to think about as part of how we want to structure these meetings. That thinking about that particular example in the idea of building relationships with partner organizations, I thought that could be nice. Maybe not in our first couple of meetings as we're still getting our feet under us, but not too far along, starting to invite folks from different partner organizations just to come and start to build those relationships and see where partnership is possible in Greenfield. Are there other thoughts on that and how we want to focus our first meetings?
Well, it seems like our next meeting will be a report back on, what our homework was, and starting to pull together a framework of goals from the open space plan. It seems like that's one of our primary to-dos, right, before we can kind of get up and running, is to figure out what we're focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also whether or not we're going to if we're inviting additional members, who are those, what types of members are we looking for? So that is something else that maybe isn't apparent yet, but should be probably early on in our process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, goals, membership.
It seems like we will be figuring out our priorities for the first little while. So maybe that'll help guide us once we have a better sense of what we're going to be focusing on. I like the idea of bringing in outside experts, people who are informed about a certain topic, but I don't think that having that every meeting would be necessary. And we're still figuring out how often we'll meet and so on as well. But probably we'll be creating a list of priority projects, and then we'll be maybe reporting in about who has been lead and what, if there's been progress on them once we get further down the line. And then bringing in, authorities or partners would make sense.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and I like, once we have those priorities set, and as sounds like there's some interest in by myself, but it's that thing from others. I'm not just projecting this. I'm looking at some maps and making making some plans, looking at map layers. That I could see us spending some time each time looking at that. Probably would be helpful for us to be doing a little review of existing state, so where we're at with open space, I could see being helpful. So that maybe in one of our first meetings too, we could spend a little time with the map of existing open spaces, and make sure we're all on the same page on what we're starting with.
We'll have to think about reporting back to Sustainable Greenfield too, like how often we want to do that, what it is we want to bring back to Sustainable Greenfield.
Yeah, and to the Conservation Commission. We are technically a task force of SGIC, and we just want to make sure the communication stays open with Conservation Commission. So I don't know, Emily, we can, however you think is best to be doing that. And it probably makes sense for us each time, because I know after talking with Travis a little bit that there's effort in the Conservation Commission to be doing a little more of this some similar work that we're talking about. Just a question of time, and capacity to work on that. So I think a key role for you, Emily, will be making sure that we're not duplicating efforts, and that we're each working on collaborating on things where appropriate, or separate things where appropriate.
Sounds good.
And to SGIC, and I think with some less frequency to the mayor as well. I feel like we want to, into the recreation department, who's not able to be here, would want to make sure that some other key folks are hearing what we're focused on and get their input.
And part of the open space plan is focusing on agriculture. And so the Ag Commission was reborn recently. So it seems like we should, I don't know if they know about us, or if we should maybe invite them or send them some kind of email and let them know. Same thing, maybe they are going to work on some projects, and we should know about it so we don't tackle the same thing.
That's a great point, Francoise. I forgot about them because they hadn't been around for a while, but they just came. They're just back.
Yeah.
So yep, that's a great point. Yeah. Does anybody know any of them?
Yeah, I
A little
know.
bit.
I know at least two. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to reach out?
Sure.
To them? Maybe see if you want to invite one of them to the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Anything else on that on the next meetings? Great. All right. Well, we can move on to an actual, not just a organizing topic, but we can move on to an actual topic here for us of the work. So I'll turn it over to Emily to talk about the Model River Corridor Protection Zoning Overlay District.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
So, Franklin Land Trust, Field Geology, and FERCog are working on a grant application for something called an EEA Planning Assistance Grant. Very short term, it's due on July 3rd. And it is, I think it's 2-year funding that is specifically intended to help communities with planning for infrastructure or zoning. This particular project that we're looking at, we are talking with 3 communities: Buckland, Conway, Greenfield. Other folks from FERCog have already spoken with the planning board about this, and they provided a letter of support. That's what we're asking for right now from this committee. And I can go over a little bit about what the work would entail, but and one aspect of this is that the open space plan that you just looked at actually talks about the work that we're suggesting we do. And so maybe we can make this be an early check in accomplishing something. And this group itself, because of the mission of it, seems ideally suited as a partner or participant along with them. So what it focuses on, actually, maybe I'll just share a little summary. I sent this around, so you might have gotten a chance to take a look at it, but in case you didn't, here it is. So it's focusing on something called the River Corridor Toolkit. I'll make sure I got that. River Corridor Management Toolkit. This was a set of management tools and conservation tools that were put together through a several-year project led by FERCog. Franklin Land Trust participated. They include river corridor mapping. So it's looking at the riverways in a region. There was complete mapping done for the Green River, including hazard identification, potential conservation projects, and priorities in terms of hazard and flooding. Some of the work that is done through this process helps update the 100-year flood mapping done by FEMA. At this point, is doesn't quite address the realities of the flooding and the hazards that we're seeing every year. So this can fill some gaps in terms of identifying real hazards. Another tool that's part of the toolkit is called a overlay district, which provides the ability for a community to change the zoning so that there'll be fewer complex and development impacts on floodplains and areas that aren't mapped as floodplains that are affected by flooding. Another component of it was something called the river corridor easement, which is a conservation tool used in Vermont. We worked with Frank Burkog and a variety of land trusts and others in Vermont to adapt that language to Massachusetts. We use conservation restrictions rather than easements, which is typical throughout the country. And that easement document was drafted. We worked with an environmental legal firm from Boston, and this particular grant would continue that work and work with us to get the final approvals from the state Division of Conservation Services, which oversees all conservation restriction that's done according to the regulations in the state. So what we were looking for in terms of Greenfield, if you see here, it was addressed in the open space plan that the toolkit is a useful tool. There's already been mapping done in our region in Greenfield, and that Greenfield could seek to apply the river corridor mapping protocol to other tributaries of the Green River, as well as using these tools to help identify priorities, perhaps for the use of the zoning overlay, or for conservation, which could reduce the impacts of flooding or provide more connectivity for floodplains and reduce impact on infrastructure. So I sent a sample letter of support. If it's something that the group would be interested in pursuing, we'd be very grateful to get you a letter of support from you for the grant proposal. And then we would love to have this group be some the entity or an entity that we would work with in the town, in the city.
Can you say a little bit more about that aspect? Are you intending that our letter of support would then say that we're interested in being an active partner in this grant? I'm not following that piece.
Sure. At this time, the proposal is leaving it open about which particular groups would be the entities that participate. So if it made sense for this task force to be working with FERCOG and Franklin Land Trust on, for example, looking at the mapping that was created for the Green River to identify properties that would be high priority for conservation in order to avoid development there, which could be affected by floods in the future. Or if the city was interested in introducing the zoning overlay, I'm not sure that would make sense for this committee to be the lead on that. Maybe that would be a different board. But the letter of support would simply be saying that you support the work and the opportunity is there for this group to be involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see us being the lead on anything. We can maybe assist or help, but but I'm totally supportive of it. I would vote for, you know, sending a letter of support.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds great to me. It sounds perfect. And yes, depending on how it plays out, I could see us having a role sort of, as we were talking about earlier, we don't always have the right people in town to take the lead as far as, capacity on projects like this. So it may not, we may not have that capacity either, but but we could definitely have a role, I would imagine, in helping with the next steps after it's implemented.
Great.
And Emily, say again, it's EEA, and what's the name of the grant?
Planning assistance.
Yes, being the Massachusetts agency.
Sure, it's the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Okay.
I'll put the link for the grant in the chat. I'm sure I've got it here someplace. I'll stop sharing.
Great. So I guess we should take a vote. I guess that's what we do here, even though we're four people. But that process we always leave to George and SGIC to manage the logistics of how these sort of things work. But do we have a motion to approve this letter of support?
Yeah, I move that we write a letter of support for this grant proposal application.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Aye.
thanks
All
very
right.
much. It's great. I hope it can be helpful to our process. Honestly, I think there's a lot of overlap, and as we put together our priority list, hopefully there'll be things that would make sense to participate in, or be able to help shepherd.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily. That's great.
And my apologies, I'm usually a good homework doer, but I didn't look at all of what you provided, so I don't know. Is there a template for the letter of support, or is that something that is being written?
There's a template, and if I haven't sent that already, I will send it to Jonah.
Great. All right. Sounds good. So moving on. We'll have a chance here for public comment here before we wrap up, but any announcements from the task force about anything upcoming or anything else we should have in mind? All right. We officially have no old business. No old business to cover. All right. Any public comment? Thanks, Pat, and those others who have joined. Anything you want to say?
Just wanted to attend the meeting to see what you folks were up to and what, the committee's going to be doing. And so this was interesting for me to listen to everyone, because it's been a long time since I was involved in, open space or conservation. So years ago, I was on the Greenfield Conservation Commission, and then I helped write the open space plan, but not the 2021 one. I actually forget what the date was, because it was a long time ago. It had to be, I don't know, maybe 2011, 2012. I really don't know, because it was, like I said, it was a long time ago. So I think it was Francoise that told me that, there was going to be an open space kind of section of the sustainable plan. But, you weren't going to be a committee like the Sustainable Greenfield Committee that works on that. So I just wanted to join today to just see what you folks were up to, and, if this would be something that I would even like to join. I wasn't sure how you were going to do this and how people could join. So I don't know if you'd want me to give you some idea of what my background is at some point.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you have some great experience with working with Greenfield's past on this. So that's great. Uh, yeah, it sounds like our next step is going to be to put together a call for new members. And then yeah, it'd be great to have you respond to that with if you're still interested at that point, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Stephanie.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having this committee. Stephanie Duclos, 166 Chapman Street. I've had some recent I&I problems in my area, and I don't know, we posted a bunch of flooding that we had recently in my neighborhood within the last few days. And I want to know that now that this task force is in place to adhere to what the guidelines were before, and that we are in fact on that document that you guys have presented tonight, that I wanted to know what type of enforcement happens once there is a problem with the I&I, and whether or not that is man-made for areas that maybe shouldn't be impervious, and culverts that may have been dammed or blocked at some point and redirected waterways. I just want to know that once you guys all come together from each commission that is supposed to be protecting our watershed and water sources and stormwater runoff and et cetera, what's the next step? How do we get that enforced when the document already had existed, but nobody was actually looking at it? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, I saw that out here in front of my house on Sanderson Street too, which was a road that was just everything was just completely redone recently, and it was a massive flooding. So this is definitely a problem that we're seeing. I don't know that it's in the purview of this particular team. And I'm wondering about the best. I mean, it's definitely DPW are folks that need to be hearing about this. Your experiences. You said Stephanie, that you had posted something about your experience.
Yes, I'm sorry. We posted a few videos online on Everything Greenfield about some of the water, I guess we call it a water rescue from underneath the arch, and a water geyser coming straight up where I had identified a culvert and protected area at one point to the building inspector, and I said it really needed to be the no mow sign was removed, and the plants had identified that this was indeed areas of protection and sensitive areas, when my neighbor also had to go through the Conservation Commission for protections, but others did not have to go through that same level of oversight. And subsequently, several water problems. And I know that all of the culverts that run from our house, and specifically there is a water overflow pipe in my backyard that sucks everything from the impervious surface, the railroad, everything in the surrounding areas of Arch, that just sucks it right back into the Green River. And no oversight has been done about that mitigation, and we've suffered that for a multitude of years. But obviously with the increased amount of rains and flooding and more impervious surface and less of our green space and trees and natural environment to soak all of that up, it's becoming detrimental to the homes in this area. Thanks.
Yeah. Do others have thoughts on how we could help pass that along?
So wouldn't the Conservation Commission be involved in something like this? I don't know. Emily?
If there is a wetland issue or regulatory issue around rivers, or an action that was not appropriate, that we would be. But I'm not sure from this description whether that would be or not. It seemed like more of a DPW issue, but
There's been, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt out of turn, but there had been significant areas of trenching throughout throughout my neighborhood. And 171 or 170, it might be 177 Chapman Street, which is directly a kitty corner to me, had been had restrictions imposed by the Conservation Commission, and I want to know that is the Conservation Commission always contacted when projects are happening in areas of concern, or is it that just a process that the homeowners have to adhere to? Because I would imagine that if something had imposed conditions, or the Conservation Commission had imposed conditions regarding protections of that area for my direct neighbor, that you know, at the 6 Arch Street, which is where they were trenching during November, and then subsequent floods that I had reported to the fire department, that I had smelled oil and toxins, which were then running into the groundwater. So I'm not 100% sure if that's the first thing and the first commission that gets contacted every time there's a development. Thanks.
sure. So in terms of how the Conservation Commission becomes involved, there are certain water bodies that are regulatory that we have jurisdiction over. So if there is a building project that has some of those present within a certain distance, then there is a need for review and possibly a process that people go through in order to get permission to do to alteration within those. So if there was an order that was there was an order of conditions, or a notice of intent that was filed on this particular property, then that would be on record. The landowner would be expected to comply with those conditions. And if there was a concern about it not happening, then anyone who's concerned can inquire with the Conservation Commission to let us know. And I'm not sure, you know, again, I don't know the details of this case, so I can't speak to it particularly, but that's how the Conservation Commission comes into being.
Hi, I want to identify that I actually did contact the Conservation Commission and the Conservation Department with my concerns while that process was happening, and that I was told that no NOI had been filed on that. So is it because it's potentially 10 feet further up on the protected area? I imagine everything that drains into the bowl of Arch and Chapman from Pleasant and North Chapman and even South Chapman. Perhaps maybe we even need to look at extending those zones if they don't already exist, or that maybe conservation needs to broaden its umbrella of you know, everything's going to run to the same area at one point, especially if we have it running under our homes at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I think you know, it does seem like the particulars of your situation is probably for, I would think, DPW to be notified of what has happened there. That from my perspective in this team, I think we're a step removed from this level, but are related in that, you know, ideally we'll be helping to protect spaces and build our green infrastructure that will increase our ability to weather big storm events without flooding our neighborhoods. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot to go there. But that is a hope that, you know, the way that the open space team could be connected to that. But as far as the specifics of this particular incident, I would recommend contacting DPW.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Just
great.
one-
Yeah, Mary.
One little housekeeping thing. I appreciate Stephanie was kind enough to provide her street address, which I promptly did not put in. And then I also wanted to circle back to Patricia and ask for her street address as well. Stephanie, what's your street number on Chapman? If you're still on?
166.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and mine is 72 Hastings Street, Mary.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Anthony, Ryan? All right, hearing none. The one thing I did say we would circle back to that the question of the call for members. I don't know that we made the kind of progress that would be helpful in us honing in on what we're looking for. So do folks think we could either proceed with a more general call for members, or we could wait until our next meeting and do a call for members for the September meeting? Any thoughts on that?
Well, could we make it general, but then refer to the sections of the open space plan? You know, there's things on, there's various categories like I can't remember, but you know, there's recreation, of course, there's, I forget, natural resources, agriculture. They might even mention something about wildlife somewhere, right? So could we put these general categories and ask people if they have any interest or expertise in any of them? That would help us, you know, see who is not already represented on this group.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. Yeah, let me try. I'll try to draft something and send it around and see what we think.
Right.
And to take that just a step further, it would be useful for me anyway, and maybe for all of us, if we could have some way of, I know we each provided a little bit of a intro to ourselves, but it might be helpful for us to know a little bit more about each other in terms of background and education and things like that, so we can really identify, you know, the sort of maybe some missing areas or something like that. And I think we could do that just in a Google Doc or something. It's not deliberating or anything like that, so I don't think it would be any problem with open meeting law or anything like that, just to provide additional info.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds great. So I'll share, when I share the stuff that I'm gonna send around, I'll just have is Google Drive folder work well for everybody? Yeah. So I'll just share that folder. That could be our home base for all of us to keep stuff in, and go from there.
And in terms of the notes, it would be great if Emily, if the document or that you were presenting to us today, if that could make its way into that folder, and Jonah, if your summary that you presented to us of the OSRP, because I'm just going to provide links to those two docs in the minutes, rather than trying to recreate them.
Right. Yep.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
That sounds good. Any last items? So there's this new template for town meeting agendas, and it calls for a roll call at the end, which is not something that we've been doing in our previous SGIC meetings, but that's what it calls for. So we'll do another roll call to end our first open space team meeting.
Isn't it just a roll call to adjourn? Doesn't one of us move to adjourn and then we second and then we take a roll call vote? Isn't that what that means?
Oh, is that what that means? It says
That's
as
right.
they appear on, the wording says as they appear online.
I know,
Which I
that's
don't-
weird.
It's very strange, but anyway, yeah, I like that better because it feels really strange to do an actual roll call.
Yeah, we're still here.
Right. Well, maybe it's to see if anybody left. All right, yeah, let's do it that way. So is there a
Well,
motion to adjourn?
I make a move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Thanks,
Aye.
everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.